Testing, 1, 2, 3, I am talking.
Testing, 4, 5, 6, I am talking as well. And we are live.
Welcome everybody to live Q&A. I'm supposed to say live first.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I'm just saying.
I just don't know my place.
There's a rhythm to these things here. I don't want to mess with the primal forces of the universe. Welcome everybody to live Q&A. I am Pastor Dave here at Pastor and the Recovering Heretic.
And I'm recovering heretic Dan, who is not on pace with Dave today.
Right, we're messing with rhythms, man.
Yeah.
It's like a good baseball swinger. Can't mess with it.
This is our John Cage Memorial Edition.
I know, right? Just mess up everything. Yeah. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Dave. How are you?
I'm all right. What's up?
What's up? What's up is Augsburg Confessions. We are continuing.
I'm going to blaze through at 1.5 a week for the next century and a half.
Until Armageddon itself.
Right.
We'll be ready. All right, so today we are going with confession number 8.
Okay.
That's what launches us.
Yes.
What the church is.
Yeah.
Oh, before we get to that,
yes,
we should recap for other people who may be joining us late on this. We're going through the Augsburg Confessions because they are the very foundational document of what it means to be Lutheran.
Right.
So, brief thing on the Augsburg Confessions. What are they? Who wrote them? Why are they important?
Right. So if you missed the history piece, the short way of putting it is there was this moment when Luther and the Reformer, Luther and the Lutheran princes, the Lutheran party within the Holy Roman Empire, which is Germany and Italy today, were basically demanded to present a list, like a summary of what they believed before what's called the Imperial Diet, which is the imperial legislature. And the Diet was gathering this, the Diet moved around every year. This particular year it was gathering at Augsburg. So hence it's the Augsburg Confession because they presented their list of beliefs before the Imperial Diet at Augsburg.
Okay. And
ta-da.
Ta-da. What was, and the need for it was what? This was to try to show unity with the Roman Church or to show the differences with the Roman Church?
Everybody had a little different aims, I guess I would say, which is partially why it didn't work, because everybody wanted something different out of it, and nobody got quite what they wanted.
Okay.
The emperor wanted a meeting in which the whole controversy could be settled because Holy Roman Emperor Charles V is planning a crusade against the Ottoman Turks and really would like his home front territory to be handled and not in a religious uproar so that he can go on a major offensive. So he cares, but his primary motivation is in theology. He would be happy with any political settlement that allowed him to march the army off towards Turkey.
Okay.
Is basically his goal. The papal party, the papal legate, and all those people want Luther to submit and prove that they're wrong. The Lutheran party is aiming to reconcile, but is aiming to reconcile in such a way that basically is like you can have your little. The Lutheran Church original goal was kind of to be recognized within the larger Catholic Church, as a legitimate piece of the Catholic Church.
Okay.
So
it was not originally meant to be a secessionist movement.
No, and they would have been, if the Catholic Church had granted them something like, what like Eastern Catholics get, right? Like Ukrainian, where like they're their own thing. They're clearly Catholic, but they're their own thing.
Yeah.
If the Catholic Church had granted that, the Lutheran Party actually would have been happy. If there was something like the German Right or the evangelical right, that was within the Catholic Church, they probably would have been content. That would have settled the issue.
But Rome just wasn't going to do that.
Rome wasn't going to do that. So, so each party kind of has this slightly different thing going on. Lutherans want to be conciliatory, but not so conciliatory that they give up what they actually believe. Rome wants them to submit. The emperor just wants a political settlement kind of at this point.
Yeah.
You know, you guys are interrupting my
great cosmic plan.
Right, my cosmic plan of reconquering Hungary and then the Holy Land. You know, like you're getting in the way here. You know, and so there's kind of this there's a lot of mixed messaging going, you know, there's a lot of cross-purpose goals going on here.
Okay. So, and we had a few that were pretty contentious already, leading up to 8.
Right.
Is 8 one of the ones that was contentious, what the church is?
Remind me what 8 says.
So 8 says...
I get 8 and 7 mixed up.
Okay. Despite what hypocrisy may exist in the church, which doesn't sound like a good way to start when you're trying to go reconciliation.
Yeah.
But despite what hypocrisy may exist in the church and among men, the word and the sacraments are always valid because they are instituted by Christ, no matter what the sins may be of the one who administers them.
This is actually one of the agreed upon articles. This was not in dispute. This is not in dispute because this issue was settled by a very ancient heresy called Donatism.
Okay.
Way back in the 200s, actually. In the year, I forget what it is, somewhere in the mid-200s, there's an emperor named Decius, and he kicks off the first, not the very first, but he kicks off one of the rare, well-organized empire-wide persecutions. Most Roman persecutions of Christians were more local level. You know, it was a governor or they usually weren't empire-wide. Once in a while, the empire went through these fits of empire-wide persecutions, but usually they weren't empire-wide. You know, so in the mid-200s, you get an empire-wide one called the Decian persecution. And Decius, the short version is Decius gives an edict that says everyone living in the Roman Empire has to make a sacrifice to the emperor and to the gods to show that they're all good, patriotic Roman citizens and to appease the gods because the Roman Empire is kind of collapsing at this point. And Decius kind of nails the problem as clearly we've offended the gods. You know, so if everybody in the empire does this, the empire will be safe and we'll know everybody's good, patriotic Romans
and the gods will be pleased.
And the God will be pleased. Christians, of course, have a problem. They don't make sacrifices to anybody, emperor or gods or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
We're not going to do this. So this kicks off what's called the Decian persecution because Decius then comes down quite hard on Christians saying, how dare you not be good patriotic Romans and work for the good of the empire, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
You know. Out of this, there's quite a lot of persecution, and under pressure of arrest and torture, there are some priests, and the issue is particularly acute in North Africa, that make sacrifice, that recant to get out of the torture. And then there was this great debate after Decius died and his edict was revoked. There was this great debate. What do you do? Because all these people and priests started coming back to church.
Yeah.
You know, and the church had this great debate. What do we do with this? There was a guy named Donatus who argued that anybody baptized by one of these priests who had recanted needed to be rebaptized. That every sacrament they ever had performed
was null and void.
Was null and void because they were clearly corrupt, because they had given in to the persecution. Yeah. We call this is the hardline position, right? You know, the church had a great debate over this. It was eventually ruled a heresy called Donatism, named after Donatus. You know,
yeah.
You want to be remembered in history, get a heresy named after yourself.
I'm working on it.
Right, yeah. Danism. So the church ruled it a heresy, and the church ruled it a heresy because it said the sacraments work not because of the person performing them, but because God is at work in them, right? You know,
right.
The person doing them is not the reason the sacraments work. The God is the reason they work. And so you can be this is why if you have a really bad pastor, you don't need to get rebaptized or something like that.
Yeah.
Because the pastor himself doesn't actually matter.
It's merely a conduit for the...
Right. The pastor is just kind of making the motions, but God is the one doing the thing. So this is actually an article where the Catholics let this one sail. They were like, okay, that's fine,
So everybody's cool on it.
Everybody's cool on that. This is a case where they were trying to, if you were trying to be combative, you wouldn't state this, right?
Yeah.
But this shows where the Lutherans are trying to be conciliatory. Be like, see,
we do have something in common.
Right, we do sign on to the same heresies you do. We do, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So
does this relate at all to, there are some Christian denominations that feel once you join their denomination, you've got to be baptized again, even if you were already baptized with whatever denomination you used to be.
Yeah, it's a little different. It's a little different because I think their argument would be you were invalidly baptized. Like either you weren't really baptized in that regard. A lot of those denominations were saying you weren't baptized because you were an infant. Doesn't count, from their perspective.
Because it wasn't your choice.
Yeah, because it wasn't your choice. Or there was a funny case relatively recently, actually, where there was a Catholic priest who'd been baptizing. There's a specific formula you have to use in baptism, and he'd been altering the formula. And they actually had to take it all the way up to the Vatican, whether every baptism he'd ever done in 30 years was invalid or not.
Wow.
Because he had altered the words of the formula, and that's actually a bigger deal. The formula is very clear, right? It's you are baptized in the name of the Father, in the name of the Son, the name of the Holy Spirit, and I forget how he was altering the formula, but he was slightly altering the formula, and there was this huge mess actually, and that's usually the other way it happens is somebody does the formula incorrectly, and the question is it right or wrong?
Yeah. So how did they resolve it?
I don't actually remember I think they said they were okay, but he got punished.
Gotcha.
I think he had to do like 6 months of penance or something like that. But I think they ruled it okay, is how it came out. But I don't remember.
I'm sure his parishioners were happy about that.
Yeah, right. So things like that kind of, you get into trouble sometimes with the Pentecostals because the Pentecostals follow there's two different formulas for baptism in the Bible. The Pentecostals follow the formula found in Acts where you're baptized in the name of Jesus. Uh-huh. And so there's always, whereas we follow the Trinitarian formula in Matthew, and the question is just the Acts formula enough, And that gets you into in some denominations, that'll get you into some debate too. I kind of like the Lutheran statement. The ELCA statement on these things, on that debate is, it is better not to argue about such things for the sake of Christian unity. Which I think is just don't argue about it.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, Renee's asking, what if a civilian does it, and they don't know the formula?
Yeah. Right. Right. I mean, that gets tricky too, right?
I actually had a priest once who did tell me that was okay. Like if you're a soldier on a battlefield,
right.
Your friend gets wounded, they're dying, you can baptize them yourself.
Technically, a baptism can be done by anybody, especially under emergency circumstances.
I guess that's where God's grace comes.
Well, right. And I mean, parents, this happens in many and various ways, right? Sometimes parents whose infant is dying, they can't find a priest, chaplains somewhere else in the hospital, they'll baptize their kid right then and there. That's perfectly acceptable. We actually have a liturgical thing for it. It's called recognition of baptism, if you want to still have a church ceremony later, because everything turned out okay,
Yeah, just as earlier this weekend, my sister told me that my mom got impatient over her taking so long to get my niece and nephew baptized.
Yeah.
And she walked upstairs one day and just told my sister, I baptized them.
Yeah. Perfectly right. That seems like a little controversial for you know.
Yeah, well, that's my mom.
Right. But again, it's a legitimate baptism because anybody can do them, actually.
Okay.
You know, they don't have to. Baptism's more universal that way. So.
Well, getting back to the politics of it, Renee wants to know, did Martin Luther and or the Lutheran movement step into the politics of the threat of Charles V for war? You know, were they concerned about the Turks? Renee's asked a good one.
Yeah, they did. I mean, Luther writes a lot about the threat of the Turk. You know, it's not very PC of him, and he's, you know, he also has this apocryphal quote, which I don't think he actually said, but it's a great apocryphal Luther quote where he said, "I'd rather have a wise Turk than a foolish Christian as a lord." You know, the point of the quote being, you know, religion isn't as important as wisdom in the leader. That's actually what you're looking for.
Yeah.
You know,
I can go with that one.
yeah. I mean, they tried, right? But they did step into the politics of it. You know, there's, you know, we won't authorize our vassals for war if you keep, you know, screwing with us like this. And then Charles gets mad because he's trying to launch a multi-nation invasion of, you know, and you got to remember Charles V, right? He's king of Hungary, he's Archduke of Austria, he's king of Spain, king of Spain's entire New World Empire, you know, Lord of the Netherlands.
He's got a lot of turf.
Right. He's
Yeah.
actually like closest a single human has come to, you know, he's Duke of Burgundy, which is a large chunk of France, you know. Like,
Yeah.
He's actually like closest any one human has probably come to rule in the whole world. You know, he's Holy Roman Emperor in addition to all that, you know, and so, you know, from his perspective, again, it's like, I'm trying to launch this multinational coalitional effort against the Turks, and you people in this little spot in Germany keep messing with my plan, you know, like, I've got bigger, you know, trying to invade China, I'm trying, you know, like all sorts of things, right? You know, like, you people keep messing with my plans here, so... that kind of stuff.
So,
what? Well, yeah, it sounds like God at work. It does. There's probably something to that, right? A little bit of providence there.
yeah. Man.
He gets so irritated, he eventually abdicates, lets his sons rule, and retires to a monastery.
Wow.
He's so frustrated by the whole experience at the end of his life. So
he gives
one son the Spanish possessions and one son the Austrian possessions, and says, "Do with it what you want.
I'm through.
I'm done with this." You know.
All because of those gadfly Lutherans.
Right. Also says something.
All right, you ready for number 9?
Sure. Let's go.
Number 9 is of baptism.
Uh-huh.
And I would assume they agreed on this one. Baptism is necessary, and that through baptism is offered the grace of God.
Yep.
Children are baptized as an offering to them of God's grace.
Yep.
So-
This one, another one. Sailed just right past, no problems.
Everybody's fine.
Yeah, everybody's fine with this one.
Okay. And given the statement here that Luther says children are baptized, is that another?
It's a dig in the other direction.
Okay.
At the radical. By this time, you have the Anabaptists and what we call the radical reformers who are kind of claiming infant baptism is wrong. You know.
So it started that early.
It did. It started.
Okay.
It gets going right about the very beginning. As soon as Luther let the genie out of the bottle, you know.
Everybody's speaking up with their version.
Right. This is actually kind of horrified Luther, you know, because this was not his goal. You know, and I have a friend who's Anabaptist, and we were talking about the history of the Reformation. He goes, "I just don't get it. Like, why don't you look like the radical Reformation is the logical conclusion to everything Luther wrote about. Why don't you guys join us?" I'm like, we just wanted, and I finally said to him, I was like, "Man, we just wanted our little mass in German. Like, that's all we really wanted. Like, you know, like, I didn't want all this other stuff you guys are involved in. Like, we just wanted a mass in German. Like, that's all." You know.
That's all I wanted. Now there's all this drama.
Right, yeah. And it's like, that's all we just wanted mass in German and for the church to stop selling salvation. You know, that was really, the two things we really wanted. After that, we were fine. So yeah. Anyway.
So did he feel bad that it was ended up fragmenting the church so much?
I don't know if he felt bad. He felt kind of grumpy, but he gets much more authoritarian towards the end of his life. Part of that is his own health problems, but he gets much grumpier towards the end of his life about it. That it didn't quite accomplish what he was hoping, it would accomplish.
Did anyone in his family, like I'm going back, there's so many times that when a religious rebellion, schism, movement, birth, that people, followers feel like the founder's family needs to continue the legacy. Probably, a big example is this rift between Sunni Islam and Shia Islam, right? Because again, you're over who really inherits the mantle of being in charge.
Yeah.
Did that happen here? Did people expect Martin Luther's wife or one of his kids?
No, not really. I mean, part of that is Melanchthon is much younger than Luther, so Melanchthon is Luther's right-hand man. And like Melanchthon, survives Luther, right? So by a lot, So like part of that is just the right-hand guy is there the whole time.
And it's very logical.
Yeah, and it's very logical. And then, but I mean, almost right after Luther's death, you start getting intra-Lutheran arguments, which is why you have later parts of the Book of Concord that are called the Formula of Concord, because we had so many arguments after Luther died amongst ourselves, we actually needed to get together and agree on those arguments, arguments like predestination and, there were whole factions that formed immediately after Luther died. The joke among most Protestants is that Lutherans fight with each other more than we fight with anybody else. And that's been true since the moment Luther died. We have been fighting with each other over various things. It's just how it goes with us.
So is that why, Swedish Lutheranism is structurally so different from...
Well, that's more a history thing of how the Reformation happened in Sweden versus Germany. Because in Sweden, in Germany, the people were convinced Luther was right. And the local nobility were convinced Luther was right, not the higher nobility. In Sweden and in the Nordic countries, it was the reverse. The king was convinced Luther was right, and then forced the whole country, church and state, together to reform on down from there.
Okay.
So it was King Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden who was convinced, Luther was right, and he just said, "Okay, the whole country's Lutheran now." Ta-da! And that's how it still works to this day. It's hard to officially count who's how. It's not really fair whenever you see who the biggest Lutheran denomination in the world is, because in Sweden, Finland, and Norway, and Denmark, you literally legally have to file paperwork to not be Lutheran with the government.
Wow.
In those countries. So literally everybody's.
You're automatically Lutheran unless you.
Yeah, unless you fill out the 2-page form. So,
religion as bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So, it's a state. So in that thing, you got the whole church-supported architecture, hierarchy, and everything just kind of moved with the king.
Yeah. And you've mentioned before that here, it's a lot looser because we started off not even having ordained pastors available.
Right, we didn't have ordained pastors at first,
So you had the congregation had to be kind of in charge of itself.
Right, congregation had to be in charge, and so it's different than in Sweden, where the Archbishop of Uppsala is still Lutheran. Technically, the Swedish Lutheran Church still has valid apostolic succession because all those archbishops just became Lutheran archbishops and things like that.
So that tie is still.
Yeah.
Wow. So, and we'll have to wrap on this because we're already out of time.
Yeah.
Do you have apostolic succession then?
I do, because we signed an agreement with the Episcopalians in like the 90s called Call to Common Mission. And part of that agreement was their bishops had to lay hands on our bishops so that we would have valid apostolic succession. This actually caused, at the time, this was actually a huge deal. There was about 400 Lutheran congregations who left the denomination over it.
Over that?
Yeah, well, because somewhere in there, the one we read, 7, right? It said, all that is necessary for the true unity of the church is that we agree on the sacraments and we agree on the proclamation of the word.
Yeah.
And their argument was, I technically think they're correct, I just don't think this is worth leaving the church over, but their argument was, you're adding something else that's necessary. Nowhere does it say the laying on of hands is actually necessary. And if we're not in agreement, then we can't be in full communion,
Yeah.
I kind of look at it as, if it makes the Episcopalians happy, whatever, but, so to this day, there's about 400 congregations across the country that are part of, I think it's the Lutheran Church in Mission Together or something like that.
Okay.
They all come out of that break, which was when we signed the agreement with the Episcopalians.
The LCMT.
Yeah.
How many?
LCMC, Lutheran Church and Mission for something. I forget what it is, but they're small, but they exist.
So how many? I don't even know what you call them. Divisions of American Lutheranism are there? ELCA.
The big
these
ones
guys
are the ELCA, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, Lutheran Church Wisconsin Synod, and the newest one is the North American Lutheran Church, which broke off over our decisions in 2009 around human sexuality. Those are kind of the big ones. And then you got smaller pockets like this one, LCM something, Lutheran Church and Mission, You have a bunch of churches. You have some churches that are what we call free Lutheran churches. They don't have
any affiliation.
They're like non-denominational Lutheran churches, basically. They didn't want any part of it from the beginning.
Yeah.
So you've got that too.
So that adage is right. Lutherans argue with themselves more.
Yeah, the funny thing is none of those bodies are in communion with each other. Actually.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. You think they'd have the closest ties? Okay. Well, on that note of non-unity.
Yeah, Lutherans are not, as I said, Lutherans fight more amongst each other than we do with anybody else.
Okay. Good to know.
The Episcopalians have this joke. I went to a seminary that was a joint Episcopal Lutheran seminary, and the Episcopalians had this joke that when Episcopalians will tolerate any heresy for the sake of unity, Lutherans will tolerate any division for the sake of preventing heresy. Which is not a bad description of either denomination's impulse. Where you'll get some people who are Episcopalian be like, "Are you Christian? Is this even what Christians believe?" And they'll be like, "Well, we don't want to divide anything, And then you get Lutherans who are like, "No, I refuse to be in communion with you because we disagree on one sub-article of, and this will be the end of you, accursed be all your works, reality probably should be somewhere
It's in the middle
between,
there, yeah.
which is, so, hey, what do you do?"
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. We got through 2 whole ones.
2 whole ones.
We're raising our average
Right.
now, 1.5 to 2 complete.
Right, we'll be going, if we just progressively continue this. It'll be
Yes.
exponential in our,
This is actually kind of fun because by doing this, I'm actually learning more.
Yeah, you're actually,
Some things that, it's like, oh, they're obviously in agreement, and yet there's still a story behind it.
Right, yeah, they're obviously in agreement. Well, yeah, sort of. Maybe.
And now I know about the free Lutherans, which is like, I got to look into that a little
Yeah.
more. Fits my rebellious nature quite a bit.
Yes, yeah, you would like them.
Cool.
There, so,
So we're off next week.
Yep.
Because we have media team meetings. So the week after, we'll be back.
yep.
So Steve, Renee, anyone else, watch for a new one in 2 weeks.
Peace. Right.